Welcome back to the Everyday Armor podcast. Today, I want to talk about something that's really important and also very relevant right now, especially if you're somebody that's on a college campus. So right now, college students are in what's called the red zone. We often hear about this, but don't fully actually understand what it is. So I want to briefly kind of just go over what it looks like, some safety tips to avoid these kinds of situations. And I want to preface this episode by letting you know that I am actually traveling right now. I'm at my parents' house in Washington. I just had a class at University of Washington. As I'm recording this, it was yesterday. So if you hear my family's dog, I do apologize in advance. Now, to kind of explain the red zone, this is basically a period on college campuses from about the time students go back until really around Thanksgiving break. With the red zone, there is an increase in sexual assault on college campuses, and a lot of these can be brought back to drinking situations, especially as people get back into school, they're getting into a new routine again. If you are especially a first year, this is a new experience. You have newfound independence. So a lot of those can become kind of things that lead to some risky situations. And of course, there's football, it's fun. And our goal here at Everyday Armor is to make sure that everyone can still go out and live life, that they can have fun, that college students can still have the college experience, but just have the information and the tools to instill some safety habits and to just understand the risks at play so that we can create those layers of safety to go out and have fun. And the more you can prepare for these situations, the more you can just let loose and enjoy yourself. So before we get started here, I do want to just list off some statistics just to kind of help you better understand the risk level here. So more than 50% of college sexual assaults occur in August until November. Women 18 to 24 are at highest risk of sexual violence compared to the general population. And each year, about 696,000 students about ages 18 to 24 are assaulted by another student who has been drinking. So when I go through kind of some things you can do to prepare, some safety tips for in the moment, if you see somebody that's in a bad situation, I again just want to remind you that a lot of the stuff we're going to talk about is kind of related to alcohol safety. So just keep that in mind as we go throughout this, because again, a lot of those kinds of environments can lead to the assaults that are seen on campuses. So we've kind of talked about what it is. So I want to cover some different myths and then the realities surrounding the red zone and, the different myths that are kind of at play. So first myth, it's mostly strangers in dark parking lots that commit these kinds of acts. In reality, and especially in college, you are most at risk around the people you know. And these are people that can be really pushy. These are people that know you well, that are able to get into close situations with you. You're typically most at risk around the people you know. And I think it's always important to remember the biggest form, substance that is used to incapacitate people, to maybe take advantage of them or exploit their vulnerabilities, is alcohol. Someone who's pressuring you to continue drinking, someone who isn't respecting your boundaries. So just keep that in mind. I think we often hear about roofies or GHB and ketamine, when in reality, alcohol is the most commonly used substance to try to take advantage of someone. Next myth here. If something happens and there was alcohol, you'll get in trouble if you report it. In reality, many campuses have amnesty policies to encourage that people go and report these things. So don't let the fear of getting in trouble keep you from reporting if that's something that you feel comfortable with. And of course, if you are a victim of some kind of assault, it's not your responsibility to have to report that. You have to look at what's going to help you heal from that experience and what you feel comfortable with. But there are a lot of policies in place to prevent you from getting in trouble, even if you were drinking underage. Next thing here, looking at just some ways to combat this and combat it more so mitigating the risk of it, just safety tips, just different things you can know how to handle different situations. So we're going to kind of look at what to do before you ever get into some kind of drinking or party scenario, what to do while you're there, and what to do if you see someone, like I mentioned before, who could be potentially in a risky, scary situation. So first thing, before you get there, I always talk about this. Have non-negotiable emergency excuses. And I constantly get pushback on, well, like you should be able to have an upfront confrontation. Saying no should be enough. And yes, ideally saying no should be enough. And that should be, the end all be all. But when you look at things through a realistic lens, especially in college, I remember being in situations that I didn't feel comfortable saying no. And maybe it was fear of what people were going to think. Maybe it was fear of my physical safety. But there were situations I did not feel comfortable just explicitly saying no. And there are drinking situations, right? There's times when they're especially intoxicated, they're not being rational, they're being extra pushy, they're not hearing you, they're not being logical. So the goal is, yeah, if you can, have the upfront confrontation. But if you're not somebody who tends to be confrontational, or it's just not working, or you feel your safety is at risk, we also want to have secondary things that we can use to still set boundaries and to still feel safe in these situations. Now, to kind of explain, non-negotiable, obviously it's something you can't change. Emergency, something that has to be dealt with right then and there. That way somebody's not trying to sit and barter with you or push at you. So an example of this could be, my roommate's about to get sick and she's locked out and I'm the only one with a key, so I have to go let her in. Or maybe this is even like a stranger coming up to you, completely unrelated to, the red zone and drinking situations, but maybe it's a stranger coming up to you like in a parking lot trying to talk to you. I'm so sorry I'm late for an interview, or my parents' car just broke down and I have to go pick them up because they're late for an interview. Something you cannot change, that is an emergency or something that has to be dealt with right then and there. So there isn't a chance, like if you say I'm tired, where they can try to kind of skirt around that. Could I get you a Red Bull, a Celsius, and they try to like solve the problem for you. But that way it's something that you just say and you're immediately leaving the situation. A great thing too is just bathroom emergencies. Like I need to use the restroom or my friend's in the bathroom and needs help. That way it gets you to a more like safe location where maybe you can kind of reevaluate, figure out what to do, how to bring help to you or something of that sort. Next thing here, when you're going out, obviously just understand like where are you going and how are you going to get there and plan for that. And understand what are the intentions of the people I'm going out with. If you have a friend who just recently went through a breakup, their intentions going out may be different from yours. If maybe you're in a fine spot romantically or emotionally, when anybody is in a situation where they're feeling emotionally vulnerable or upset, a lot of times we do tend to drink more because we're trying to mask that pain, and that's a human response. But understanding that can help you prepare for that night out. If you know this friend might get more intoxicated, really looking at like, how are we going to get home? How are they going to get home? What are your secondary options? If they do happen to leave and there's nothing you can really do and they're pushing and now you're by yourself, do you have somebody who can come pick you up? Are you maybe not drinking as much so you can drive yourself home? What does that process look like? Understanding the intentions of the people with you. Are you going out for a girls' night? Are you going out to really let loose? Is somebody going out to meet up with people? And maybe they're going to an after party that you don't want to go to. Just kind of thinking those things through. That way, again, when you get there, you already have these things in place and you can have more fun with it. Having some kind of like safety word or phrase. Maybe this is something with your friends. Maybe this is something like you say in conversation and you all know we're going to the bathroom, we're going to like reconvene. Maybe this is something you're texting your family, especially if they live close and they know that they need to come pick you up. Or just even a check-in code to your friends. Like, are we all good? And if somebody doesn't respond within 30 minutes, like you all go looking for that person. You all reconvene somewhere, you have your meetup point. And I know these things sound silly, but you can make it fun. And there are so many situations, again, in the red zone especially, where there are not only assaults, but like things can really go sideways. Or maybe your friend has been like pulled in somewhere that they don't want to be. Like just making sure that you check in throughout the night, have those code words. And last thing here, before you go out, please turn on Uber PIN verification. Now, I am not saying that there is like these crazy big statistics of Uber drivers people pretending to be an Uber driver to come grab people and like kidnap them. But it's just a good safety tip to have in place. The PIN verification is basically a process where you turn the setting on your phone on Uber, and before your Uber driver can start the ride, they actually have to enter your PIN number. So obviously, if they're not your Uber driver, they wouldn't be able to start the ride. So that's kind of the idea there with PIN verification. So just having those little things in place. Again, maybe you've already had a couple of drinks and you would have naturally just kind of forgot to check for the Uber, but now they can't even start the ride unless you give them the PIN. So just those little layers of safety already in place. Now, when you are out, what can you do to stay and feel safe? First thing, and like I kind of mentioned before, having those check-ins. So, having maybe like these things talked about beforehand, but then making sure that you're staying true to them. When it's time for that check-in, you're staying up to date with it with your friends. You make sure that if somebody's not responding, you really go check in on them. And those little things maybe take like a minute. Maybe it's maybe not even a minute. If everybody responds, it takes a couple seconds, but it really does help you stay safe and make sure that everybody is like having a good time. No one needs to leave. No one's in a dangerous situation. Next thing, trying to watch drinks. But I think what's really important is looking at the times we may not think about needing to watch our drinks. When you've already been drinking, your attention is typically focused in on kind of what's like right in front of you, right? And let's say if you like even went to the bathroom, you leave your drink with a friend, their attention, what's happening in front of them, then maybe their drink. And last priority is probably watching your drink. Being mindful in those kinds of situations. Am I going to put a cover over my drink, which I would highly encourage, and we'll link to nightcaps in the show notes. And even getting drink testing strips. If you weren't able to watch your drink, and best practice would be to get rid of it and get a new one. If you're not going to do that though, and you are going to drink it, at least just have like a drink testing strip so you can test for and make sure that it tests for the most commonly used drink spiking substances like GHB and ketamine. I highly recommend Think Twice drink testing strips. And again, we'll link to those in the show notes. Both those, both those you have discount codes for. So that information will be in the show notes if you want to look at those. But have those things, again, in place in a moment just to mitigate the chances something could go sideways or something could be put into your drink. Next thing, look at odd behavior. Things that just feel off, whether it's at a party, at a bar. Maybe it's people that are just kind of sitting around. They're kind of watching a little strange where it just makes you feel off. Maybe they aren't talking to anybody and engaging, but they're really watching one of your friends intently or someone you don't even know. Look for that gut instinct that something just doesn't feel right or somebody's being really pushy with a drink. People are trying to get you to a spot in like a house at a frat party or like a house party where you know that they could easily kind of like pull you in somewhere, or maybe it's a more isolated spot. Look for those kinds of signs. If you see people like pulling girls to those kinds of spots, just be mindful of it. Trust your gut and always, always report it, get help, investigate. Just don't put, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, don't put yourself obviously in like physical danger as well. Next thing, don't, and I kind of mentioned this, but try not to go to any isolated like spaces or locations in a house. If you're waiting for an Uber, trying to make sure that you're just staying in a populated area with space around you. If you are walking to your Uber and there aren't a lot of people around, this sounds really silly, but like take the corners a little wide, just so you don't know what could be waiting around that corner. Take it a little wide, create space around you, try to stay in more populated areas. Don't go to those isolated spaces where people may not be able to see what's happening, especially if you're in a loud environment where you yelling and asking for help might be kind of muted because of the loud environment. And obviously people then couldn't see it either. So just try to stay around people as much as you can. And I already mentioned this, but really, really remembering not to leave your drink places. Don't leave it with friends. You might love your friend and trust your friend, but we've all been in situations where even you might have been drinking and had your phone down and you forgot your phone was even sitting there, or whatever it is, your brain obviously isn't reacting and acting the same as you would if you were sober. So just keep that in mind. Put a drink cover on, take your drinks with you to the bathroom or finish them, get a new one when you come back, whatever you need to do, just make sure you don't leave those drinks unattended. And I know that that's a tip we always hear and we kind of roll our eyes at, but please, please, please focus on that. Now, when leaving, I kind of referenced trying, if you're waiting for an Uber, to not go to like isolated spaces, but really be mindful of that, especially if you're waiting outside. And try, if you can, to wait in a safe location until your ride is literally there. You have like 5 minutes. So get yourself, close to an exit, but just try not to be anywhere outside. And if you can, obviously try to also go with people. It also reduces the risk somebody could try to like jump in your Uber to like catch a ride or something and make you feel uncomfortable. So just be mindful where you're waiting for Ubers, and of course, verify, check, and have that PIN verification on. Think about where you want to sit also in those Ubers. Now, again, the risk of like violent crime in Ubers is not crazy, but there are definitely instances of sexual harassment and assault. So think about where you feel most comfortable. There are pros and cons to different spots in an Uber. If you're sitting diagonal, like in the back seat, but diagonal from the driver, that does put the most distance between you and the driver. But also, like, they could possibly try to like hold something to you. They could even, if you needed to do something to them, it would be a little bit harder, like if they were not pulling off your location. Just think about, like, what would I do in a worst case scenario? If you're sitting directly behind them, you do have access to them. It's hardest for them to control you because you're directly behind them. Potential risk, if you had to like get out of there really quick, there is the potential, depending on where you're obviously at, what road you're on, that you could be getting out into oncoming traffic. So just, again, to think about that, and you're a little bit closer to them. If you're in the front seat, which I wouldn't strongly encourage, you could possibly access the wheel if you ever needed to in like an absolute worst case scenario. You are a little bit closer to them. It's easier for them to hold, like, in, again, worst case scenario, some kind of like weapon to you, but you do have a lot of exposure in the front seat. So just think about, where do I feel most comfortable sitting? Where am I going to sit when I get into that Uber? What's my intention? What would I do in a worst case scenario? What am I most afraid of? Have there been any incidents in my area that have been reported? Just be mindful. Verify your ride, as use the PIN verification, check the Uber driver, all those things. And remember, I believe Uber is rolling out this feature. I know Lyft has it, where you can set a preference for non-binary and female drivers. Highly encourage doing that. It doesn't guarantee you will have a driver who is female or non-binary, but you can set that preference. But if you get an Uber driver, maybe they have low ratings. Maybe it's a male driver and you just don't want a male driver. You feel uncomfortable with that. You have to go by yourself. It's midnight. You can always cancel the ride. Like, you take I think it's like $5 sometimes if you like cancel it. That is worth your safety. So just think about those little things and don't feel guilty for it. You don't have to justify the way you feel. Put your safety first and trust your gut. Red flags in an Uber, just really quick. If you are in one and you're headed home, first of all, try not to obviously set like your exact location. Try to set like a surrounding location if you can. If you live like in an apartment, you can set the apartment complex. But if you live like in an actual residential house, try to set one in a surrounding area. If you're Ubering back to like your sorority house, a little bit different. There's a bunch of people that live there. It's not like your actual residential home, just you and maybe 2 other people living there. And really be mindful if anybody ever tries to like get you to pay cash, or if they obviously aren't like stopping at your spot, if they're asking overly personal, uncomfortable questions, if they're just for any reason like making you feel uncomfortable, like with what they're trying to talk about or anything like that, be mindful. They're continuously taking wrong turns and trying to kind of excuse it or whatever, and it's just like making you start to feel uncomfortable. If they try to take stops they shouldn't be taking. I had an Uber one time. I was with some of my girlfriends actually, and we were going from our college down to like all the bars, and I never forget, this Uber driver was like, "Oh, I forgot to get gas. I need to stop off and get gas." And we're like, he still has a quarter of a tank. He would definitely be able to drop us off before his light ever came on that he like needed gas. And we were like, no, we don't feel comfortable with that. Your gas light isn't even on. And we're like 5-10 miles from our destination. And he kept kind of pushing with us. And finally we were like, pull over, we're getting out. And we ended up calling another Uber. Like, don't be afraid if you don't feel right about something to pull over and report that person, because that is inappropriate. There's no reason that we need to go with them to get gas when you clearly don't need to. Those things that just don't logically make sense. They just feel off, and it's better to be safe than sorry. And another red flag, being pushy with drinks or food that they have. I know some Uber drivers will have it. Doesn't mean that all of them have bad intentions, but if they're being especially pushy, like, no, have this water or have this food. You should really never take drinks or food from any Uber driver, even if it's sealed. Just the best thing you can do, unless you are like desperate for water and like you really need some or something, make sure it's sealed for sure before ever drinking it. Be mindful of the risk you're taking, but just in general, please try to not take drinks or food from an Uber driver ever. And also note, there have not been verified documented cases of people using chloroform in Ubers to like make people pass out. And I've heard like people releasing like gases in their car or something. That has not been verified of people using chloroform to kidnap in Ubers. So just something to be aware of. Now, another thing, if you are going into like your residential home, like just you and a couple roommates live there. Again, not like a sorority house, not like an apartment complex or like dorms. Try to avoid going, especially if you've like gone through everything to not put your direct address in there. Try to avoid walking straight inside. Wait for them to leave. Maybe kind of like walk a little slow, make sure that like, unless you're deliberately uncomfortable and need to get to physical safety, but that way they just like don't know exactly where you live, especially if there were any things that just made you feel a little iffy about the ride or anything like that. Something to kind of think about. Of course, share your trip with people. Make sure people have your location, even if you're not sharing every single Uber ride. There are also features where you can directly share your ride. And there's another app, Third Eye. I think I've talked about them before, and we'll link to their information in the show notes. But basically, it's an app where you can live stream. So if you're in an Uber, you can live stream your ride to a squad. Now, if you maybe don't want your parents knowing you're out at like 2 a.m, you can just create a squad with your friends. You could even set like your route. And if that route deviates, they'll get an alert. If you need help, you can click a button real quick. It alerts people. And I believe the alert that goes off is like the Amber Alert that goes off on your phone. So they get an instant like, hey, something's wrong, for them to go check, and it's recording it. So if in an absolute worst case scenario, something did happen, you're going to have video evidence of that was recorded to your squad. So something to think about. It's a completely free app. If you have like hit the maximum amount of hours, then you can like pay for more if you want them, but something to think about. Again, it's completely free to download and get and start using. And we'll put the information again in the show notes with nightcaps and think twice. If to kind of transition, so we've looked at like what you can do before you go out, what to do while you are out, what to do when you're leaving. And I want to focus on what you can do if you can see something's kind of not going right with someone. Now, there are the 5 Ds of like bystander intervention. To simplify that, if you see something that's going on, you can always pull in an authority, get help. You can always try to ask that person, hey, are you okay? And like directly step in if you feel it's safe to do so. Document what's happening, record it, take photos of it, take notes of it. Make sure though that you're never putting yourself in physical danger. You are not going to be help to someone. It's like, if even when you're sitting on a plane, right? Who puts the mask on first? If you see somebody who's drowning, jumping in, let's say it's in a river with fast rapids and you trying to save that person, well, now there's 2 people who are at risk who need help. So try to document what's happening, call for help. Don't put yourself in any kind of physical danger, because it's really actually not going to be much of a service to that person. Instead, try to get help. Try to keep an eye on what's happening. You can offer to share those things with somebody, and you can try to distract from the situation. If you see somebody who's in, let's say, a frat house or at a bar and someone's pulling them and you're like, this situation doesn't feel right, make up an excuse. Hey, I heard your friend's looking for you if you don't know this person, or pretend to be their friend. Hey, I have to go to the bathroom. Will you please come with me real quick? Or I heard somebody was, needed you because they're sick in the bathroom. Whatever you can do to get that person away from the situation. And these are, again, some of those excuses you could have that are already thought through. What kind of excuses would I use to try to remove someone from a situation I know doesn't feel right, safe, or it's dangerous? If there is someone, maybe even in your friend group, who's like trying to go home with someone and you're like, I can see the writing on the wall. This is not a good situation and I don't want my friend in that position, but maybe they really they want to go and they're being pushy about it and they're intoxicated, so they're not being totally like their rational selves. Make an excuse. I'm gonna get sick. I'm not okay and I need you to come with me. Or whatever you need, whatever feels applicable to your life or your relationship with this person, try to have those things. So if you needed to, you could use it to get them out of that situation. And that's again where it comes, looking at what's their intention going out. Is this person going out because they had a bad breakup and they're looking to kind of let loose? That's then, okay, if I know that about this person, they might get a little bit more intoxicated than normal. What kind of excuses could I use to make sure that they can get to a safe location if something were to happen? They were trying to go home with someone that maybe like you knew wasn't a safe situation or a consensual situation. So think about those things. And there's a lot of sometimes I think stress about intervening, but you don't always have to physically get involved. Sometimes just being that bystander that is recording or that is trying to like make those excuses feel more low risk, especially if there's like an intoxicated person who feels threatening to you involved in the situation, those things can be just as helpful, if not more helpful. So don't put yourself at risk, but do just be mindful. Think about the things you can use, especially with the people that you are going out with. And I want to close up this episode about the red zone with a couple just like final, truths to touch on. A lot of the most scary, uncomfortable moments can start in situations that start off as things that don't feel scary or threatening, but they may involve pressure, social pressure, or just like pressure directly from a person, or them putting pressure on you to keep drinking, to where your senses and your logic is incapacitated because you've overconsumed alcohol to what you normally would. It's not always this person in a bush or in a dark alley that's jumping out and kidnapping you. A lot of these things happen with the people we know, and that's why it's important to have these excuses. In a lot of those situations, to be truthful, they just feel uncomfortable, like to say no, and it feels awkward, or I don't want this person to think XYZ. And don't be hard on yourself for having those feelings, because I think they're very natural, especially in college. It's hard to set those boundaries, and there is fear of like, not even like retaliation physically, but just like what somebody might say about you. And that is a human thing. That is why we look to have these realistic ways to help you in these situations, to still get away when things just don't feel right, even if there isn't like an explicit thing that happened that was like, that's not okay. Just that gut instinct alone is enough for you to feel empowered to set a boundary. You don't have to explain yourself. Alcohol also isn't like, it's not like the biggest helper, but it's also like not the only villain. Like, these situations can be fun, and they can be innocent, and they can, be like a fun experience in college, but a lot of it's the situations and the environment and the people you're around that make these things especially dangerous. And I would just encourage anyone to like be mindful of the people they go out with. Are these friends that actually would go home with you if something felt off, or friends that are really going to look out for you and have your back, that are really going to make sure they're checking in throughout the night, that aren't just going to ditch you without letting you know. So just really be aware of like, what environments, what people do I surround myself with, to make sure that you again can go out and have fun. And that's not to say that it's your fault, obviously, if something were to happen, but we just want to mitigate the risk that it could. And having those people you really trust in your circle can severely help your safety. And last thing here, I know I touched on this, but reporting is your choice. Don't let people pressure you into it if it's not something you feel comfortable with. If something does happen, you don't have to tell anybody. You don't have to report it. You need to operate with what you feel most comfortable with, and there's no expiration date on when to report it. If you're not ready to do it, take your time. If you decide to later, that is on you to make that decision. And if you decide never to report it, I had an incident that I have never reported, and that was my choice. And I'm happy I made that choice. I didn't want to go through that, and that's okay. And somebody who did choose to report it, not in this situation, but if somebody did choose to report their incident, that is totally their choice. So just really remember that. And if you ever need anything, if there's anything I can do to help you, please reach out. Please let me know, DM, email, text, whatever works best for you. I appreciate you guys. Please, again, just be mindful. It is the red zone. There is an increased risk, but that doesn't mean that you're not allowed to have fun, that you're not allowed to live life. Just try to have as many layers of safety in place as possible so we can go out there and do the shit we should be able to. Thank you guys for listening. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, things you want to see on the podcast, please let us know, all below in the show notes. And last but not least, rate, review, subscribe, all the things. Let us know what you're thinking about the podcast. And as always, I appreciate you being here.